2 Chronicles 23 1-24-27, through the Bible. Chapters 23-24. Theme: Revival during Joash's reign. During the reign of Joash, the third period of revival came to the southern kingdom of Judah. Of course it was not much of a revival, and most of the credit for a return to God belongs to the priest Jehoiada. Joash is made king. And in the 7th year Jehoiada strengthened himself, and took the captains of hundreds, Azariah the son of Jeroham, and Ishmael the son of Jehohanan, and Azariah the son of Obed, and Maaseiah the son of Adaiah, and Elishaphat the son of Zitri, into covenant with him. 2 Chronicles 23:1. The leadership of Judah was dissatisfied with the bloody queen Athaliah. So now Jehoiada, the priest, calls them to a meeting, a very private meeting, to let them know that there is a son of David who is still alive. They all pledged themselves to make this little fellow of the line of David their king. They gathered Levites and the chiefs of Israel and laid careful plans to crown little Joash, who was in the line of David. A third part of the group would act as porters at the doors of the temple on the Sabbath. A third part would be at the king's house. A third part would be at the gate of the foundation. They would not permit anyone inside the temple except the priests and the Levites. The Levites around the little king would all be armed with weapons. Jehoiada gave out spears and bucklers and shields which were kept in the temple. All of these arrangements were carried out. Then they brought out the king's son, and put upon him the crown, and gave him the testimony, and made him king. And Jehoiada and his sons anointed him, and said, "God save the king." 2 Chronicles 23:11. This was an exciting and thrilling coup, and little 7-year-old Joash, who is in the line of David, is now on the throne of Judah. Execution of Athaliah. Athaliah thought that she had killed off all Tyre offspring. Why had she done such a brutal act? She had a thirst for power. She wanted to be queen. There are certain men and certain women in this world who will do anything for power. Every group or class of people has them. There are preachers who will do that, deacons will do it, politicians and dictators will do that. There are many members of the human family who will stoop to almost anything in order to have power. They are, like this queen, craving for power. Now when Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and praising the king, she came to the people into the house of the Lord. 2 Chronicles 23:12. I tell you, this woman Athaliah was taken by surprise. And she looked, and, behold, the king stood at his pillar at the entering in, and the princes and the trumpets by the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced, and sounded with trumpets, also the singers with instruments of music, and such as taught to sing praise. Then Athaliah rent her clothes, and said, "Treason, treason." 2 Chronicles 23:13. From her standpoint it was high treason. Then Jehoiada the priest brought out the captains of hundreds that were set over the host, and said unto them, "Have her forth of the ranges, and whoso followeth her, let him be slain with the sword." For the priest said, "Slay her not in the house of the Lord." So they laid hands on her, and when she was come to the entering of the horse gate by the king's house, they slew her there. 2 Chronicles 23:14-15. Revival through Jehoiada. Joash is still a little fellow, only 7 years old, so Jehoiada is his regent. Jehoiada is actually the one who will make the decisions until this boy comes of age. Jehoiada is God's priest, and he leads the nation back to the worship of God. And Jehoiada made a covenant between him, and between all the people, and between the king, that they should be the Lord's people. 2 Chronicles 23:16. Jehoiada broke down the altars of Baal and killed the priests of Baal. He revived worship of Jehovah by setting up the order of priests and Levites for the burnt offerings. Singing was restored as it had been ordained by David. Porters watched the gates so nothing unclean entered the temple. And all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, after that they had slain Athaliah with the sword. 2 Chronicles 23:21. There is repetition over and over of the same theme. Sin always brings complications, trouble, heartbreak, the judgment of God. Revival restores peace and quiet to the land. Reign of Joash. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Zabiah of Beersheba. 2 Chronicles 24:1. Jehoiada, the priest, is the one who really guided and led this little fellow during the early part of his reign. However, his mother's name is given to us, and she must have been a good mother. She apparently agreed with the return to the Lord which was taking place. Her home was in Beersheba. When I was down there not long ago, I thought of the mother of Joash. Beersheba is also the town of Abraham. And Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. And Jehoiada took for him 2 wives, and he begat sons and daughters. 2 Chronicles 24 2-3. Joash did what was right under the coaching of Jehoiada. Then we have the strange statement that he took 2 wives for him. Of course this didn't happen when he was 7 years old. Remember that he reigned 40 years. Is the implication that it was all right to have 2 wives? No. It was wrong. It is not recorded because God approved of it, it is recorded because that is what he did. Considering the background of that day, 2 wives was really a small number. This was extremely mild, especially for a king in that period. And it came to pass after this, that Joash was minded to repair the house of the Lord. 2 Chronicles 24:4. As Joash grew up, Jehoiada grew old. He was 130 years old when he died. Apparently he lost his control over the other priests, and the temple was not restored. Although it is questionable to say that Joash led in the revival, there wasn't much of a revival under him, it was revival. And he was the one who planned and insisted on repairing the temple of God. And he gathered together the priests and the Levites, and said to them, Go out unto the cities of Judah, and gather of all Israel money to repair the house of your God from year to year, and see that ye hasten the matter. Howbeit the Levites hastened it not. And the king called for Jehoiada the chief, and said unto him, Why hast thou not required of the Levites to bring in out of Judah and out of Jerusalem the collection, according to the commandment of Moses the servant of the Lord, and of the congregation of Israel, for the tabernacle of witness? 2 Chronicles 24 5-6. Apparently Jehoiada has grown old, and the priests are indifferent. They have fallen down on their job. For the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, had broken up the house of God, and also all the dedicated things of the house of the Lord did they bestow upon Balaam. 2 Chronicles 24:7. This tells us what had actually happened to the temple and who was responsible. God's temple was in a terribly disreputable condition. So Joash takes the matter in his own hands. And at the king's commandment they made a chest, and set it without at the gate of the house of the Lord. And they made a proclamation through Judah and Jerusalem, to bring in to the Lord the collection that Moses the servant of God laid upon Israel in the wilderness. And all the princes and all the people rejoiced, and brought in, and cast into the chest, until they had made an end. 2 Chronicles 24 8-10. Until they had made an end means that they got all they needed. Now it came to pass, that at what time the chest was brought unto the king's office by the hand of the Levites, and when they saw that there was much money, the king's scribe and the high priest's officer came and emptied the chest, and took it, and carried it to his place again. Thus they did day by day, and gathered money in abundance. 2 Chronicles 24:11. Joash couldn't trust the Levites going out and collecting the money, so he puts this chest there in the temple, and people put their contributions there. By the way, many organizations since then have used this method. They put out what they call a chest of Joash and ask folk to put their offerings in it. And the king and Jehoiada gave it to such as did the work of the service of the house of the Lord, and hired masons and carpenters to repair the house of the Lord, and also such as wrought iron and brass to mend the house of the Lord. So the workmen wrought, and the work was perfected by them, and they set the house of God in his state, and strengthened it. 2 Chronicles 24:12-13. As a result, the repair work of the temple was completed. And when they had finished it, they brought the rest of the money before the king and Jehoiada, whereof were made vessels for the house of the Lord, even vessels to minister, and to offer withal, and spoons, and vessels of gold and silver. And they offered burnt offerings in the house of the Lord continually all the days of Jehoiada. 2 Chronicles 24:14. There were sufficient funds to remake the vessels and implements to carry on the regular services in the temple. But Jehoiada waxed old, and was full of days when he died. 130 years old was he when he died. 2 Chronicles 24:15. This gives the explanation of why the priests were negligent in carrying out the order of the king. Jehoiada was probably senile. He had experienced bringing up this boy, and I suppose he had liberties that no one else would have had with the king. And they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel, both toward God, and toward his house. 2 Chronicles 24:16. Jehoiada actually received royal honors in his death. Apostasy after Jehoiada. Now after the death of Jehoiada, a new era begins. Now after the death of Jehoiada came the princes of Judah, and made obeisance to the king. Then the king hearkened unto them. And they left the house of the Lord God of their fathers, and served groves and idols, and wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for this their trespass. 2 Chronicles 24:17-18. You see, as long as Jehoiada lived, the princes did not dare go into idolatry. Jehoiada maintained a very strong influence. Joash is a young king and probably very lenient. These princes pledge allegiance to him, but they go out and worship idols again. Yet he sent prophets to them, to bring them again unto the Lord, and they testified against them, but they would not give ear. 2 Chronicles 24:19. In his mercy, God sends prophets to warn them, but they will not listen. So God sends a message by a man who is the son of Jehoiada. And the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah the son of Jehoiada the priest, which stood above the people, and said unto them, Thus saith God, Why transgress ye the commandments of the Lord, that ye cannot prosper? Because ye have forsaken the Lord, he hath also forsaken you. 2 Chronicles 24:20. Now notice the shocking thing that happens. And they conspired against him, and stoned him with stones at the commandment of the king in the court of the house of the Lord. 2 Chronicles 24:21. My thought is that Joash had been given wrong information about this man. He was the son of Jehoiada. You would think that Joash would never have done a thing like this, but it reveals the evil influence of the princes and the despicable deeds that they were engaged in. They put him to death. Thus Joash the king remembered not the kindness which Jehoiada his father had done to him, but slew his son. And when he died, he said, The Lord look upon it, and require it. 2 Chronicles 24:22. In other words, this dying man calls upon God to take vengeance upon the king for this judgment upon Joash. And it came to pass at the end of the year, that the host of Syria came up against him, and they came to Judah and Jerusalem, and destroyed all the princes of the people from among the people, and sent all the spoil of them unto the king of Damascus. For the army of the Syrians came with a small company of men, and the Lord delivered a very great host into their hand, because they had forsaken the Lord God of their fathers. So they executed judgment against Joash. 2 Chronicles 24:23-24. God judges them by defeat in battle. Although Joash had been a good king, he had ordered this heartless murder. God must judge him because he is the king and because of his influence upon the whole nation. And when they were departed from him, for they left him in great diseases, his own servants conspired against him for the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest, and slew him on his bed, and he died, and they buried him in the city of David, but they buried him not in the sepulchres of the kings. 2 Chronicles 24:25. Jehoiada the priest had been buried with honor, now Joash the king is buried with dishonor. Now concerning his sons, and the greatness of the burdens laid upon him, and the repairing of the house of God, behold, they are written in the story of the book of the kings. And Amaziah his son reigned in his stead. 2 Chronicles 24:27. So we see that Joash at the beginning led a revival under the influence of Jehoiada, but, after Jehoiada's death, he apparently lapsed into a state of apostasy.